Welcome to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. I'm Ali Maxwell. This week, we are going to head through some of the big games in the Premier League and also get a little bit of insight, maybe from the EFL, possibly from across Europe. I've got Mark O'Hare and Nigel Seeley rejoining me this week. And you can find us on podcast platforms, but also on video platforms as well this season. If you search for Team Matchbook on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, you can watch back the podcast and see how excited we get with all of our selections. Sports tipster Nigel Seeley joining us today. How's it going, Nigel?
Yes, very good, Mark. Sorry, Ali, very good. Looking forward to speaking to Mark as well. But very good, Ali. We have a great week last week. I think we went 3 out of 3, and now I'm on nap in the Premier League one. So I'm glad to be back. I know that the bosses from Matchbook have got me on a pay as you win role. So hopefully I can win again this week to return for the third week running. But looking forward to the Premier League. Delighted to the season so far. Everything's going well at the moment. So all good from my end.
Yeah, the big bonus-related payments for you. And Mark O'Hare from We Love Betting here as well. Mark, a busy midweek for you. Do you love weeks with midweek football across the EFL that you have to be across, or do you prefer a quieter midweek?
It's bittersweet. You can't really complain when there's football on, but yeah, it does increase the workload tenfold, really. Pretty hard to sort of turn around stuff from Saturday before Tuesday and get a good handle on all the teams, and then again before Saturday again. So I managed to see quite a lot of football this midweek. Saw some teams I've noted down for the notebook for longer, basically further down the line in the season. So on that account, it's been a good and profitable win midweek.
Good. Well, before we get into the games, Matchbook are offering a £10 risk-free bet to any listeners who don't already have a Matchbook account. If you sign up today, you will be eligible for this £10 risk-free bet. For more details, head to offer.matchbook.com for full terms and conditions. I must stress this is for over 18s only, and we'd ask that you all be gamble aware when going through the card for this weekend. Please don't bet more than you can afford to lose. Let's start with Liverpool and Arsenal. Clearly the big game in the Premier League this weekend. In fact, the only two teams, after only 2 games, that have the full complement of points. 6 points for both Liverpool and Arsenal. The game's at Anfield, and you can get Liverpool on the Matchbook site at 1.53, Arsenal at 6.4, and the draw at 4.9. Liverpool minus 1.25 goals is available at 2.11, and Arsenal plus 1.25 goals at 1.85. Over 3.25 goals, 1.97. And the under 3.25 goals, 1.94. So plenty to digest here, plenty to go through. It's another very short-priced favourite, but a big game, Mark. Talk me through this one. What do you fancy here?
Yeah, it's a game that normally screams goals, Ali. The last 7 meetings have had 35 goals, which is an average of 5 per game. At Anfield, the majority of those goals have been Liverpool's. They've scored 22 goals in the last 6 games against Arsenal at Anfield. That's one every 25 minutes or so. So pretty impressive, really. The matches have tended to follow a very familiar pattern too. Liverpool wait until Arsenal kind of push forward before launching a counter at pace, pressing them high, pushing Arsenal into individual errors as well. The 2 patterns have worked very well for Liverpool in the past, especially early on. They've scored 10 times in the opening 20 minutes of those past 6 meetings of Arsenal at Anfield. So fast starts are something we've become, accustomed to for Jurgen Klopp. As our results at Anfield, 41 Premier League games unbeaten. That's almost 2.5 years worth of action. 6 wins from 10 against the Big Six in the last 2 seasons at Anfield, scoring twice or more on 7 occasions as well. Now, they haven't looked the same side as we saw last year, from a defensive setup at least. Norwich obviously gave them a few problems on the opening night. They struggled in pre-season too. There might be a few chinks in the armoury yet, but particularly with Alisson unavailable. I've got more sympathy for last Saturday when they had to go away to Southampton just hours after the 120 minutes in Istanbul. Listening to sort of Klopp and his backroom staff, they had very, very little time to prepare. Almost all the free time available was reserved for physio and recuperation. So actually credit to them, even though they were second best in that match. But for Arsenal, I've not been overly impressed by them at all. At Newcastle, the clean sheet will give them a psychological boost. I don't think they created a huge amount. I know the team sheet was very different to what it could be this weekend because of certain players not being match fit for that match. But against Burnley at the Emirates last week, Burnley Burnley generated almost 2 expected goals. They won the shot count, they won the shots in the box count, the XG battle as well. So yeah, all the attention was to Ceballos for what was quite a wonderful debut. There's issues there, and there's a lot to like about this Arsenal team. I think they're one of the best transfer windows of all the Premier League teams. There's still those nagging doubts surrounding them, especially in these big games. Defensive ability, organisation, mental, I guess, fortitude, if you want to call it really. So I've got no issues with their prospects going forward. It's more at the back, really. And the market certainly seems to rate their chances higher. I don't think it'll be a 5-1 game, but, I think their only sort of chance, really, is to fight fire with fire. And if that is the case, then I think Liverpool come out on top here. Arsenal's long-term record away at Big Six teams is dreadful. No wins in 20, I think it is now, since January 2015. 11 defeats and 14 away. And last season, or since the start of last season, if you look at all Big Six ties, only 6 of 32 were won by the away team. Now Unai Emery's had a better record than recent years. He drew 2 of 5 at the Big Six last year, but most telling for me was the amount of goals in those games. All 5 saw BTTS, 4 went over 2.5, 4 went over 3.5. And let's not remember that they only kept 1 clean sheet away from home last year. It was against 10-man Watford, who went down to 10 men after 10 minutes or so as well. So I'm not a huge fan of punting goals lines that start at 3. You only get your cash back if there's exactly 3 goals. You need 4 or more to actually profit. And I think the Asian handicap is probably about right. So for me, the price and the bet isn't yet up on Matchbook, but it's Liverpool to win and over 2.5 goals, which will get us a smidgen of odds on around 1.9, 1.95, which I think is a really good bet here. Alternatively, just look for Arsenal. The Liverpool fast start. Arsenal's last 6 away games at Liverpool and City. Over the last 3 seasons, they were losing at half-time and losing at full-time. 5 of those 6 games saw over 3.5 goals as well. So plenty of angles to consider, but for me, the bet is Liverpool and over 2.5.
Nigel, Mark makes a pretty convincing case as to why Arsenal might have a pretty tough trip to Anfield here, with 6.4 available for Arsenal, 4.9 for the draw. Is there any hope? Is there any value in those prices? What do you think about this one?
I think the most impressive thing that Mark did there was he did all them stats, all the stuff without even taking a breath, which was quite incredible. Liverpool against Arsenal. It's all about goals, as Mark says. I mean, he's got all the stats. I mean, 8 of the last 10 matches between these two sides, over 2.5 goals has landed. 8 of the last 10, both teams to score. It's just all about the goals market for me. I mean, I think Liverpool will eventually be strong enough to win this game, but I do believe Arsenal will score. I think Aubameyang, Arsenal haven't started that great, but Aubameyang started on fire, and I think that he will cause Liverpool defence some kind of problems. Norwich could have scored at least 2, and probably at least another 1, and maybe 2 or 3 in that game, which is very much unlike Liverpool to give so many chances away when you consider they've got probably the man who's supposed to be the best player in the world in the heart of their defence. So I think Aubameyang will cause them problems. I think Arsenal will score. I think Mark's angle that Liverpool will win and Arsenal will score is a good one. I made the case last week, and I was very, very lucky to get away with it, as we know in the Tottenham Man City game, where I went with Tottenham and Mark went with Man City minus the 1.5. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet on a win like that, because I was very fortunate to win it. But I do think when you play big handicaps and you have a side that will score, I think it's very hard. The other team has got to win by 2 clear goals. And I think this is a similar kind of case here. Liverpool could have all the statistics in the world, but defensively they are going to concede a goal, as Mark has admitted already in his analysis that he thinks that both teams will score and Liverpool will win. So I think if the line went, the 1.25 does look about right. If it went 1.5, which I doubt very much it would do, I would be very tempted to back Arsenal plus 1.5 goal. I do think we get carried. The prices of Liverpool, Manchester City go off so short because they do win, but they don't necessarily have to win 4 or 5. They can win by 1 goal, and I think that the handicaps at the moment are a little bit too in favour of the big sides. But saying that, if you go through the records of the last couple of years, Liverpool have won this fixture by half-time. It's been over, and that they can never really cope with Salah. I do think that Arsenal look a little bit more defensively strong. I know we haven't really seen that yet in the 2 matches they played, because they haven't played any real high calibre sides. But I do think defensively they'll be stronger than they will last season. I would have a slight lean towards Arsenal plus that's 1.25 if the money come for Liverpool. But I just do think the goals angle is the way to play, because I think that every single game that Liverpool have played in, they've conceded so far this season. Both teams have scored in every one. Over 2.5 goals landing in every single game as well. And so I think that is the way to go. We're over 3.5 goals. I agree with Mark. I don't like really betting over 3.5 goals, but there's certain games and certain matchups where you just can't see anything other than goals. And I think this one here screams goals. So it's over 3.5 goals from me. But I'm having a slight lean towards Arsenal plus 1.25 goals, purely and simply because I do expect them to score.
I think the logic is sound. It worked for you last week, as you mentioned, in that Man City Spurs game. We're going to talk about Norwich and Chelsea now. Norwich at Carrow Road, 4.3 to win this game. And Chelsea, 1.83, the away team. The draw at 4.15. On the Matchwick site, on the handicap, you've got Norwich plus 3/4 of a goal, 1.87. And Chelsea minus 3/4 of a goal at 2.08. Over 3 goals, 1.95. And under 3 goals, also 1.95. This is really interesting. Nigel, you were very bullish on Norwich last week. They were your best bet across the weekend, and they absolutely smashed Newcastle. Chelsea drew with Leicester, and that game turned into a bit of a basketball match. They did have the excuse, I suppose, of that travelling back from Istanbul, but maybe not looking particularly solid in their league games so far. In which case, are we leaning towards Norwich at all?
Definitely, most definitely. I think we both said last week, Mark wrote the article piece about in teams on one game of football and how the public gets sort of carried away. And I think it was a perfect example with the Newcastle. The only trouble with that Newcastle game last week is I'm not really going to get massively excited about it because I still not quite sure whether Norwich are any great shakes or Newcastle are really dreadful. So that's my sort of really slight concern in this game, how I approach this game. The one thing I do think, though, is that if you look at the start 11 and you look at the players they've got on play, there is no way that Norwich should be up 4.33 to win this game at home. No way at all, not with this Chelsea side. Chelsea lack a goal threat, and we said it last week, and I mentioned it in the team I wanted to oppose in the pre-season preview. Chelsea have just got a season just where they've just got to hopefully finish in the top 6. But if they finish 10th or 9th, that's really where I think they are at this present time. I think there's a huge amount of pressure on the youngsters in the side. Mason Mount had a good score, last week, but I think there's a huge amount of pressure on them to deliver. And at a Norwich side, which we absolutely rock in there, and I think with the crowd behind them, it's a tough place to go, Norwich. Even when last season fantastic and the atmosphere there is great, they'll relish this. And Pukki's absolutely on fire. Scored 4 goals already in the season, and I think Chelsea are vulnerable here, really, really vulnerable. I wouldn't necessarily back the 4.3. If you're watching it, maybe a couple of quid have a small interest in it. But I do think if you're a serious player and you want to have some value, want to play on the Matchbook Exchange, I do think a lay of Chelsea here at 183, 185, getting the draw on your side is a great bet, because they aren't anywhere near the prices that they should. They're anywhere near the team that they're being priced up for this thing. They just don't offer goals. Tammy Abraham and Olivier Giroud are just not a top strike partnership in the top half of the Premier League for me. Or if they play them individually, the goals have got to come from the middle. You take Hazard out of the side, where are they going to get the goals? And that is what's going to cause them problems. I thought in the first game, they were poor against Manchester United. They showed how defensive they were all over the place. And Leicester should have beat them comfortably in the second half. But Leicester were a much better side. James Maddison run them ragged. And I think that they're vulnerable in this game. So I like here Norwich plus 3/4 of a goal. That would be my main bet of the 3 games we're talking about this weekend. Many different angles. I'm not going to play on the goals. I wouldn't get involved in the goals. I do think if you're a small recreational punter and you want to turn your couple of quid into a tenner or decent money, have a couple of quid on Norwich to win this game. If you're a more bigger punter and you're looking at it for some laying activity, then lay Chelsea. But I want to oppose Chelsea at what I think will be a very, very tough place to go this season, Carrow Road. And I think Norwich are severely underrated in the betting in this match.
A lot of love for Norwich on this podcast so far this season. Mark, do you agree with what Nigel has said there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 2 angles that I picked out there: the Chelsea lane and Norwich plus 3/4 of a goal. They were clear and deserving winners last weekend. It should be said, Newcastle did miss 2 good first opportunities, but thereafter Norwich definitely took control. I was really delighted for them really after their efforts at Anfield. I think they'll target those home games against bottom half teams, and they'll pick up plenty of points that way. But I'm really interested to see how they'll take on the big six sides at Carrow Road too. I think if they signalled their intent at Anfield to really go for teams, then this could be a really good game. But if you look at the sort of goals markets, there's no value at all. Excuse me, the bookmakers are already all over it, so there's very little value there. But we spoke about Chelsea's promising performance at Old Trafford. They played pretty well in the Super Cup too, and then again in Leicester in the first half last week. So there seems to be a few kind of themes now running with Chelsea. They're losing their way in the second half, potentially tired from that midweek match in Istanbul. It's difficult to know, but Leicester certainly were the better team in the second half. A few issues to iron out for Chelsea: the lack of balance in the team. They're not solid enough at the back. Leicester opened them up countless times. Creativity lacking a little bit too, and I'm not sure Lampard knows which system out of the 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 best suits his options. Jorginho and Kante looked a little laboured in that second half against Leicester. They've not enjoyed field control in any of their games, I don't think. So I think that's certainly an area for Norwich to get supremacy on. They're very comfortable on the ball. They've got pace from full-back, width across the pitch as well. So, they're going to be very intent at getting forward and causing this team problems. And you look at Chelsea, Lampard said at the start of the season he wanted to attack, he wanted to entertain. But Emerson and Kante joining the three attacking midfielders and the striker last weekend, it just left them so open when possession was turned over. They've conceded 5 goals in the last half hour as well, which is quite alarming so far this season. But as I say, goals would probably be the angle that most people look to, but they're very, very skinny quotes. So completely with Nigel here. Chelsea have only won 9 away games in the Premier League since the start of last season. They're a weaker team on paper to last season, and I think they're a weaker team in their dugout too. So for me, it's a lay of Chelsea, or alternatively get Norwich with a 3/4 goal start on the Asian handicap.
Tottenham and Newcastle next. This one at the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and they are a very short 1.24 to win this game, with Newcastle, the away team, at 13.5 on the matchbook site. The draw is 6-1. At Spurs minus 1.75 goals, 1.93, and Newcastle with 1.75 goals, 2.02. Over 3 goals, 1.93, and under 3 goals, 1.99. Again, Mark, we're talking about a Spurs team who look very, very strong, who got a fairly fortunate point, I think it's fair to say, at the Etihad last weekend, but who, at home to Newcastle, a team that we have not been a fan of ever since our pre-season discussion panel. I don't think we're seeing much to change our minds at this stage. So in terms of finding value in this game, where have you sort of landed as you've looked through it?
Yeah, it's just like with Spurs, really. You mentioned the one-sided nature of last week's game. They lost the shot count 33, scored with their only 2 shots on target, considered 12 shots inside the box, and an XG tally of 3.39. But football's a funny old game. But for me, it was more of a kind of nod towards those pre-match prices to say, this is the Premier League today. The difference in quality between first and third is vast. But the difference between third and potentially 20th is also pretty vast. And I think that's what we're going to see on Sunday, really. The result last week will obviously give Spurs a massive confidence boost. I still think they're finding their feet. I still think there's issues to sort out. Not, Eriksen and Vertonghen's futures for starters. The European transfer window is still open there, so there's still speculation. Son is back from suspension, which is a boost. Lo Celso's back in contention, or should be at least. He should be fully fit and ready to go. And Lucas Moura will want to be involved as well after his impact. So they do have options now going forward. In terms of the match, Spurs were only shorter last season when they hosted Burnley and Huddersfield. I think it's just a reflection of where they are at home against these teams under Pochettino. He's got a 66% win ratio at home. That improves to 78% when hosting the bottom half. You'd expect them to wipe the floor with Newcastle fairly convincingly. I mentioned those couple of chances Newcastle had at Norwich, but apart from that, they didn't turn up. Folded when the pressure increased. Bruce clearly wasn't happy with the work off the ball, called them in for extra training on the Sunday, which I can't imagine went down too well with the players or their families. So there's already problems mounting at Newcastle. They're joint favourites for relegation already. That's despite being, 7 or 8 to 1 for relegation when Rafa was still in charge. Pretty toothless in those first 2 games. I think this is a very difficult game for them. Under Rafa, they lost 11 of 12 games against the Big Six last season and lost all 12 games at Big Six teams since promotion. In half of those games, they failed to score. In half of those games, they lost by 2 or more goals. And to me, that's the most obvious angle, really. Spurs minus 1.5. Since the start of last season, they won 12 of 15 at home to teams outside the Big Six. They won all 6 against the bottom 6, kept a clean sheet in 4 of those games. Newcastle conceded at least 2 goals in 9 of 12 at Big Six teams as well. So I think if you look at Newcastle from last season, they're certainly weaker on paper, certainly weaker on the pitch too. I think they've struggled to score here, and I think Spurs should easily score 2 goals.
Nigel, given I think that you're even less keen on Newcastle than Mark is at this stage, this could be a bit of a bloodbath, both your breakdown of the game but also the match itself.
Well, they're not going to win it. I definitely wouldn't be rushing to back Spurs at 1.2 prices. I mean, this is Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, you back Tottenham at 1.2 over the years, you'd be a very poor man. Newcastle, we all know they're poor, but the market may have overreacted to them. I mean, they're my big fancy to get relegated, as we said. But I also made the point that they have a very tough opening 9 games of the season, and then we may have just got a little bit carried away. Steve Bruce could be gone by Christmas, and you could have someone else in. Sam Allardyce could be back in charge, and suddenly they could be getting points again, which isn't a bad shout, really. I mean, I could see something like that happening. The problem is for me is that Spurs will win, but they're going to have 10 men behind the ball, and their record at their new stadium, they haven't been really massively convincing. They haven't really been beating teams 3-4s. They've been grinding out results. They struggled against Aston Villa, and it was only because the pressure got to Aston Villa in the end in the second half, and they struggled it. There's 2 angles for me. Tottenham will win. I think they probably will cover the 1.5. I think they probably will cover that market easy, but the price reflects, the odds of 1.2. So it doesn't really give me much value. I think the 3 goal angle's an interesting one for me because it's a push on 3 goals, and I just can't see any way Newcastle scoring this game. I really can't. I think they're one of the weakest attacking sides in the Premier League. Everything is on the shoulders of the new signing, who is Jorginho, who hasn't produced anything in the games that I've seen so far. And I do believe here that Newcastle failed to score. So that brings in the under on the 3 goals, because if it's 3 goals, it's a push. The only way I'm seeing us losing is if Tottenham score 4, which is a tall order. So I'm tempted by the under 3 goals. I think it was 190, 199. I think you said it was 190, 97. I like that purely because I don't think Newcastle score. And the other thing I think is the best bet, and I think we have to wait to see if match will go up with the market. But I think that Tottenham to win to 0 is a great bet here, because they will win, and I think they'll just be a 2-0 win, 3-0 win, another 3 points, another comfortable victory, and just get 3 points and keep going for the season and plan ahead for next week. So Tottenham will win, price of no value, the 1.5 goal, not for me. So under 3 goals, tentatively with a push, but the Tottenham to win to 0 bet would be the bet I would have.
Okay, now it's time for any other business. This is a selection of yours that can be outside of the featured game, so anywhere across Europe, maybe from the EFL. Nigel, what's your fancy this weekend?
Can I only have one? There's 2. Only the one.
I think we'd love to get a bonus selection from you as well if there's 2.
Okay. In the Premier League, I think Leicester will beat Sheffield United. I was really impressed with Leicester second half against Chelsea. I think Sheffield United have done really well, but they've played 2 very, very tough teams, 2 very easy teams in the Premier League. And I think this is a real test. And I think the game is set up perfectly for Leicester, the way they attack with pace against Sheffield United, strong and physical defenders. But I think one thing they're going to be vulnerable to is the pace of Maddison and Vardy. So I think Leicester at 5-4 away from home is a fantastic bet. And my second bet would be in League One. I'm going to go for Wickham odds against to beat Southend. I cannot believe that Wickham are odds against to beat Southend at home. Wickham unbeaten start to the season. Southend destined for the drop, absolutely in turmoil on and off the pitch. And I think if you can get odds against Wickham to beat Southend, that's the best bet in the Football League.
Mark, what's your favourite selection ahead of the weekend?
I'm going to Italy. It starts again this weekend, which is quite fun. Largely a watching brief, but I do like the look of Torino to beat Sassuolo in Turin on Sunday night. They're around 1.9-ish. They finished 7th last season. 1 entry to the Europa League qualification due to Milan's financial position and FFP issues. That means Torino will have already played 5 competitive matches before this game, including a game against Wolves on Thursday night. Now, I know, a fairly tough competitive match a couple of days before probably isn't ideal, but for me, it's more an opportunity for Torino to really tune into the first league game of the season. They're clearly going to be further down the line than Sassuolo. They are excellent in Turin last year, 12 wins from 17 when you exclude the top two, fifth best defensive record. Also, Mazzare, the head coach there, he's got a great record against bottom half teams of Torino, 12 wins from 15. And Zaza partnership has been looking really sharp as well in the qualifiers. So Sassuolo have made some decent signings in the summer. Caputo, Obiang, Tolya, just a few. They're certainly looking to be a little bit more physical and solid. They're a good team. They play some good football under De Zerbi, but away from home, they took 4 points from trips to 12th and above last season. So I expect them to come up just a little bit short. But yeah, Torino for me.
Good stuff. Well, we've been through Liverpool and Arsenal. We've been through Norwich and Chelsea. We've been through Spurs and Newcastle. 3 big games in the Premier League this weekend. You've given us some selections from elsewhere. So the only thing that's left is for me to ask you to run me through the one selection, your absolute best bet from the weekend. Nigel, starting with you.
Wickham to beat Southend.
There you go. Turmoil on and off the pitch for Southend, says Nigel. What about you, Mark?
I'm going back to the Liverpool-Arsenal game. I think Liverpool to win and over 2.5 goals is a cracking bet.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insight today, guys. Absolutely loved having you on the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast. No doubt we'll be back again same time next week to do a very similar sort of thing. Thank you so much for watching and or listening, guys, and tune in again next week.